I did have some thoughts on new coaches around the NBA. I will ask for your opinion on Adrian Griffin taking over for the Milwaukee Bucks as their new head coach, and then Nick Nurse joining the Philadelphia 76ers as theirs. So, Wayne, you can start wherever you want, but what did you think of those hirings?
I liked Adrian Griffin. I kind of was eyeing him for the Chicago Bulls job actually, that Billy Donovan got. You know, I think people forget, at least for me, like someone I guess he kind of went the similar route as a Darvin Ham, right? I think they were both undrafted or maybe late round picks if that. So definitely kind of came under the radar, but I believe like Adrian Griffin was like put up there with rookie of the year when he initially came out and was just a defensive force more so. I think he was kind of close to the top of the league in steals, I believe too. Just kind of an overall gritty player, which I feel like usually makes pretty good coaches overall. Yeah, kind of fitting that Darvin Ham type of style. Uh, if there was a player out there, if there was a coach out there that doesn't have previous head coaching experience, uh, I would definitely pick Adrian Griffin just because of you know uh, his overall background. I think it was also with the Raptors, I believe, previously too, and that during that title run. So definitely has that history, and his son is playing in the league too. Obviously he's a pretty decent coach, or if he's able to have a son that, in my opinion, like I called him like as a possible top rookie, and I think he should kind of showcase that. Um, yeah, I'm all for Adrian Griffin. I think that's a good pick. Um, but I certainly think a better pick was getting Nick Nurse in there for the 76ers, right? I think that's exactly the kind of coach they needed. Uh, Different in contrast of Doc Rivers, right? I think Doc Rivers was always known as that players coach, and I think I talked about that before. So I feel like him coming in, good motivator, but then really detail oriented, knows the X's and O's, knows how to get those favorable matchups. And with the roster that the 76ers have, I think that's definitely what they needed. Because I think if you ask a lot of the 76ers, I feel like I've watched some interviews that some of the players had. They didn't want to say like, our coaching isn't the greatest or something, but you could definitely sense a little bit of that. And with Nick Nurse, you're gonna get the opposite. You're gonna get a guy that knows, if he's able to replicate what he's was able to do in Toronto, is basically just maximize the talent, the situation that you have there, the player matchups, etc. Which I think in this day and age, especially in the playoffs, that's exactly what is necessary. And we see that with the Heat, what they were able to do, in terms of that. And then Ime Udoka, he did that last year, I think, with the Celtics, just making sure that you have those proper matchups and exploiting them. So Nick Nurse, I think, is a great hire for the 76ers there.
Yeah. To start with Griffin, I mean, he's had stints with as a coach at least Chicago, OKC, now, Toronto obviously, and now moving into Milwaukee. But I mean, I feel like he's been a part of a lot of playoff, teams. He understands that context. He walks right into that same situation in Milwaukee. There were reports that he actually went to Giannis's house and just hung out with him. I don't know what happened there. They had to talk about him potentially coaching. And not too long after, he was named the head coach of the Milwaukee Bucks. So I think he built some rapport like straight off the bat with Giannis, and I think that's gonna mean a lot. I mean, you need to have the backing of your best player, obviously, and somebody who Giannis at least feels comfortable with. So, I think I'll take all your points for what they are. I mean, his son, especially being in the pros too. I mean, he's obviously had some hands-on, ability to kind of extend his knowledge to his own blood. So, in a lot of ways, get a fresh start, get a fresh look. It's not a coach that's been recycled, a bunch of different times and has had like moderate to good success. I mean, this is somebody who's kind of got a blank slate and an ability to, you know, create a culture that fits, his own view and his own vision. And we'll see what that is. But Milwaukee's definitely not short on talent. So at the very least, I think we could probably expect a top four finish in Griffin's rookie season here to come. Nick Nurse, yeah, I mean, I obviously great coach, got off to an amazing start with Toronto. Not really sure what happened. Obviously, in this last year, the year before, I mean, losing some big stars. I mean, obviously losing a guy like Kawhi, Kyle Lowry's, definitely a hit to to the locker room, the culture, everything that happens out on the floor, obviously. But no, and I think in a lot of ways, Philly's been lacking, what you've been saying. They've been lacking like a true coach's coach and somebody who's going to do the X's and O's and push guys and maybe be confrontational. I don't think James Harden will fare very well in a Nick Nurse run, unit organization. I think if Philly was smart, if I was the GM of Philly, if I could do some sort of sign-in trade to get James off the team, I mean, that's probably be where I start because I don't think that's going to fit, what he's ultimately looking for at this point of his career. I mean, there were rumblings that Mike D'Antoni might have gotten that job, and they said that if that was the case, Joel Embiid would have asked for a trade, and nobody would have been surprised because that would have revealed the hand of Daryl Morey that essentially they're just trying to kind of butter up to James to keep him around. But at this point, I mean, I'm just not a James Harden guy. I don't think this guy is going to be one of the pieces that get them to a championship, get them over the hump. It's a cultural thing. It's a motivation thing. It's a grit. It's a hustle thing. It's everything that is not the Miami Heat. And I think Joel has that fire. I think he has that dog. I mean, I didn't like his comments in the offseason kind of blaming the rest of the team besides himself and James. It's like to have the BS exit game that they did and putting up I think a combined 24 points. It's like you guys, are obviously all world talents, but when it comes down to it, when you're faced with all the adversity in the world, I mean, this is what you really show us, and not just what you put on the court, but also how you voice yourselves in the press, like what kind of teammates you really are. So, this is a wake up call for Joel with the Sixers. I mean, if it doesn't work next year, where they're at, the conference finals and they're like pushing on it, some hard decisions are going to have to get made because he's really I think going to wear out his welcome as somebody you envision as a championship leader in that sense. So hopefully Nick Nurse can do the job, but I don't think you could hand select a better option outside of Monty Williams to take over this squad.
Yeah, no, 100%. I mean, could you imagine? Because it wasn't that a thing, right? With the 76ers a couple seasons back now, right? Where they had the decision of either picking Tobias Harris or giving an extension to Jimmy Butler, right? Uh, could you imagine, what would happen if Jimmy Butler was with the team, with the 76ers, like along with Joel Embiid, right? I feel like that would have just settled things, but obviously they went in a different direction there. So, but to your point, yeah, Harden and Nurse, that'll be an interesting, especially, Morey, like James Harden is his guy and everything. So, how would that all shake up? Because Harden's only going to get older. He's, what, 33, 34 now or something like that. Embiid's in his prime. Something's going to have to happen there, whether they bring in another player in his prime, but then that's going to take some time to season a little bit. So a lot of question marks, I feel like, for the 76ers overall and kind of what they're going to be needing to do going forth here. But at least from the X's and O's standpoint, the coaching standpoint, I think Nick Nurse definitely nails it on the head. It's just gonna be a matter about the personnel. I think trying to figure out what makes the most sense for him.
Yeah, I'm trying to think about other landing spots for James around the league. Like what would be good fits for him. I mean, I've heard the Phoenix talk. Trying to
Hmm.
think what else, like would a Dallas round, like it's just hard. Like would the Portland Trailblazers, take a swing to give Lillard another? I don't know. It's hard to say, but all I know is wherever James goes, wherever a guy like Kyrie goes, I just feel like it's all like sizzle, but like when you're really trying to compete, like there's no stake amongst those guys, and I'm just yeah, I think I'm at my point with those two, but I think yeah, Philly's setting themselves up the best way that they can. I'd love to see what they kind of remix it with for this upcoming season. I don't think you can just stand pat and expect everything to be fine. But I
Hmm.
think they're talented enough to at least get in the conference finals, if not make a really true, push for the finals next season if the chemistry is there, if it gels all together and all that. But
Yeah.
so I guess that definitely that definitely is a step in the right direction. I did have another question for you if you have no more comments on Nurse.
Well, I was gonna say like, oh, with the 76ers, or maybe they blow it up and say, hey, Joel Embiid, do you want to go to Portland? It's like, oh, sure, no, yeah, sales tax over there, right? For retail items. So yeah, maybe he goes over there. Trades a bunch of first round picks, maybe some young talent that they got there. So that could definitely be something since apparently Lillard doesn't want to leave. So and he's only getting older as well. But obviously a talent like Embiid, MVP, right? Like that's a ton. That's gonna be a quite a haul there, player in his prime, at the center position. But yeah, time's a ticking, I feel like, for the 76ers, whether they're gonna see if they can either move Harden, pick some players that maybe suit Nick Nurse's style a little bit more. Because it always seems like Harden, he kind of needs that ball to be the playmaker, right? So which isn't Nick Nurse's style. I feel like his style is much more about spreading the ball, sharing the ball, etc., etc. So that's definitely where I have, I guess, my doubts for him fitting into their system. But yeah, maybe I Lillard and Embiid need to happen. I think that's that's where I'm getting at there. So yeah.
Yeah. What would that cost you? Like Brandon Miller, Anthony Simons, three firsts, four firsts, like something crazy. But no,
Honestly though, yeah, like would if you're the 76ers, right? Given everything now, it's like I don't do you take it, but then at the same time, right? I feel like Nick Nurse was like, no, I wanted to get out of. I feel like there was a mutual agreement just to like part ways over at Toronto because it felt like they weren't going anywhere, and I feel like Nick Nurse, he's too good of a coach to be like with the team that's going to be kind of the middle of the pack, right? I feel like for the next couple of years, so I think that's where Nick Nurse is probably headed though, but yeah. Um, yeah.
yeah. If I'm Philly for now, I'd probably pass. I would have to probably have to make that kind of call at like the trade deadline next year if like the team's really not getting to where it needs to go. I'd probably maybe start pulling the trigger there. I'd maybe start with Harden and work on some other pieces there too. Maybe a Tobias buyout or like some sort of like just shake up, what Tobias Harris is for that club because it just feels like he's just a guy at this point. He's an overpaid guy and he just just I think they need to get tougher. I think they need to get quicker. I think they need to be, more defensive minded. And I just don't see him as being like the right fit and hasn't really been the right fit for a while. But anyways, the question I wanted to ask you was also a lot of rumblings about Joe Mazzulla and his job in Boston, how, he's performed without any sort of setup. I just want to know, like, what did you make of his first year? And, if you were the GM of the squad, what would you do with a guy like Mazzulla?
So it's interesting is that, and I think you might have alluded to some of this before with regards to the Celtics and kind of how they function, right? Like they were also down in the last series, I believe, too, right? Not just the Heat series. I think they were down 2-0, I believe. So against the 76ers. So I think it was the
Yep.
76ers, right? So it's like,
Hmm.
do you need to have your back on the back against the wall to coach, or like you ought to be the person that isn't just reacting towards what other teams are. You ought to be setting the tone, right? I think that was like a thing in ER, right, where Dr. Green was saying to his younger doctors or resident doctors, basically like you set the tone. Like you don't want to, if you have a person that with a bleeding heart or whatever, you're not going to be like, oh, kind of cry and just be all fearful. It's like, no, you need to be the leader. You need to set the tone. And that definitely, whereas I feel like with Joe Mazzulla, he never set the tone. Where Udoka, it seemed like he did, and it was a lot better at that. Hence why he was, the head coach there. So that's probably where I feel like I have doubts with Mazzulla being the tone setter. He's much more of an adapter. It felt like, and that's why his team kind of came back, from both those series. So that's where for me, maybe he's much more about the assistant coach for now, right? For now, I think he's like younger than Jimmy Butler or like just as old as Jimmy Butler, which is pretty funny. So like he's a young coach and maybe needs more seasoning. Um, but at the same time, like he got this head coaching position kind of, at a whim, right? Like it was kind of close to the season and they're like, oh, let's get rid of Udoka because he had some extramarital affairs against policy, things like that, right? So I'm not gonna be like give all the I guess responsibility on Mazzulla for everything. I think he maybe did the best he could, but I feel like he's much more of an assistant coach still at this point in his career. Whereas they need that tone setter uh, uh, as the head coach because this team is way too talented to just go behind or be behind, play from behind in both these series, right? Like they're much more talented than either of those squads that they faced against. So yeah, there really was no excuse, I believe, to kind of fall back behind against those teams there. So I'm kind of undecided. I don't know if I'm gonna axe him right now, but in my opinion, though, like he's still an assistant coach. He still has that assistant coach mindset where I make the adjustments, but I'm not the tone center, right? As a head coach should be.
Man, fair enough. I'll take your points. I don't know. This one rubbed me the wrong way just to think like, hey, you're gonna fire this guy. Like he comes into a season with all the turmoil that was kind of like set up, you know, for the team. I mean, I feel like that probably had to be some sort of hit, to the locker room. What that probably did to guys like Tatum and Brown. I mean, what I heard was that Udoka is the kind of guy to really hold both those dudes accountable and like get in their face and not be afraid to say what needed to be
Mm-hmm.
said. And I think that when you just shake up the culture of a team like that, take a leader figure off the sidelines for those guys. I mean, somebody they probably entrusted and obviously went to war with. I mean, got to the finals, got really close. I mean, that had to be a huge morale, knock for the team. And you're right, absolutely like loaded roster, really talented team. I think we should give the Sixers and Heat a lot of credit for what they did against the Celtics. But man, I just have a hard time like Missoula, in his first year to kind of enter into a situation like that, to keep the ship steady, to keep everything intact. Anything could have fell apart at that point. You don't really know what kind of shifts could take place, but we've seen, a team like the Brooklyn Nets with all the talent in the world just completely fall apart at every single seam with a guy like, Steve Nash and, certain personalities that obviously like made that whole thing implode. But in a lot of ways, I just give him a lot of credit for taking his team to a Game 7 of Eastern Conference Finals in his first year. Come back from down 3-0. I mean, if he would have got swept, I mean, I think we have a different conversation just now. But it's like, man, I don't know. It just seems very harsh. Guys in his mid 30s. I mean, he's like technically our age and just kind of like leading the way. I mean, I'll take your points on him being like, this is his rookie year. I feel like in a lot of ways, if we were to evaluate a rookie player the same way we evaluate a rookie coach, I mean, would we be as brutal against a guy like Ant Edwards if he didn't win the finals in his rookie year? It's like it's hard to say. So I mean, he was given a lot of talent. He was given a big responsibility. Whether he's up to the test, I'm not sure, but I'd love to give him a couple more years to really show us who he is. This game in all of sports, I mean, time ticks quickly, and pressure is mounting, and there's a lot of nerves and money on the line, things like that. So I get it. I think if you were to pull him from that role, obviously you'd probably have to can him. The only guy I could see at this point makes a lot of sense would be Monty Williams. It's like, again, a guy I just keep recycling the name, just keep throwing it out there, but that dude did nothing to lose his job in Phoenix. The players, from what I saw in the bubble, I mean, seriously, that guy was like crying in the locker room with those guys, and rallied them, to a lot of big victories in the bubble, and like that team was completely forgotten at that point in time. And, obviously built their way to being a finals team, almost winning it all. Uh, he's the only guy I think could look inside the souls of Tatum and Brown, like get them to play better together, get them to give, everything they have every moment of every game. It's just like, it's hard to say. I mean, I'm still, Tatum doesn't get injured. Game 7 might be a different story. We don't know. But a lot of the continuity issues, I think, with those two have been, more and more ever present in conversations now. And I still think you keep the band together, but that's just my thought. I would keep Mizzoulo for at least, next season, see how it rolls, and keep the team together. I mean, maybe add some different rotation pieces, but I wouldn't be doing a whole lot to completely blow that thing up.
Yeah. Would if you're a Celtics fan, would you want if there were to be a change, right? If there were to be a change, would you want Mazzulla at the head coaching position and kind of to what you were saying, like kind of keep that continuity, or would you want someone like an internal hire, right, with previous head coaching experience for the Celtics? Would you want Bradley Stevens coming back, setting the tone, and then maybe Mazzulla is like, you know what? He's the president. He was head coach before. Maybe let him take the reins. I get to keep like an assistant head coaching position or something like that, right? Kind of maybe take a pay cut and kind of a downgraded position there, but I get to learn from Bradley Stevens directly more so of. I get less of this pressure. He's not the best press conference person. I think his or his like sideline reporting interactions like very much mimics the Greg Popovich model, right? But he doesn't have the same mystique that Greg Popovich has. So, less of that, much more about the X's and O's, working with the players, and then you get Bradley Stevens to kind of come back, taking the reins, kind of be that kind of like Pat Riley did, right? Where he was the former head coach, was the president of the Miami Heat, I believe, too. And I was like, you know what? I think I need to take the reins here and kind of lead them forth because I don't believe there's anybody that can be a better head coach than me right now. So maybe Bradley Stevens does that. Would you do that, or would you kind of stick where the current status quo?
I think you bringing up Stevens is a great point and overlooked for sure. I wasn't even thinking about that. I think if you were to roll into the year with Missoula and you get to the All-Star break or something and you're fluttering at like a few games over 500 or something, maybe you make that decision, just fire him there and have Stevens come right down in there and figure things out like a Pat Riley. I mean, I think he needs to work on his hair, slick it back, add some extra snake oil if he's really going to make that move. But just to remind myself, did Riley do that to Van Gundy or Spo? I can't remember.
I think he did that to Van Gundy, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, I think that might have been like when they got Shaq, or I know Dwayne Wade was involved in there. So yeah,
Yes, because I think Van Gundy was leading the squad, and then the second they got Shaq or something like something wasn't
right.
going on with Shaq and SVG, and it was like, all right, you're out of here. Like Riley's back in. So no, I think that's a great point, and obviously he knows that team better than anyone else. So if it is your responsibility, I mean, sometimes you got to roll up your sleeves and get on in there. And there's not too many examples of this. I think the Florida Marlins actually did that at one point too, where the GM, who had absolutely no managerial experience, decided to do that for himself. And I'm missing the name too. I think he failed miserably, but it's just not often times where you see somebody get back into onto the bench. And Stevens is obviously an amazing head coach, so I think that would be an incredible fit. So we'll just have to see. I just would just love to see this guy be able to give this one more shot and to prove everybody somewhat wrong, even if Celtics ultimately don't get over the hump and win an NBA title.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I agree. It'd be nice. Yeah, give him the shot. Seems like a good dude and everything, and yeah, just don't fall so behind in the series. I think get your players ready, like mentally, physically, whatever, the X's and O's too, right? So yeah.